Morning. What we have is this newly published sefer called the Minchas Osher Magefa Corona, and he has here pages in which he summarizes questions and answers. So he doesn't go through all the logic and the arguments and the sources. He just presents sort of the bottom line. What we're going to try to do is go through this and then maybe one or two other tshuvas and make comments sort of to make it more understandable. Perhaps we'll embellish it in certain cases. We might ask questions, give answers, not give answers. That's what we want to do. So if you have the pages, then we're beginning with what should be numbered as page 111. And that's Simon Chaf Aleph. With regard to the first os here in Simon Chaf Aleph, you'll see that Simon Chaf Aleph is broken down into Yud Daled subcategories, Yud Daled Osios. So there are 14 different questions, 13 of which he answers, one of which he sends you to another one of his forum. And we're going to begin, of course, with the first of his questions. And that is, Mi shehichlim mimachlas hakorona ha'im tzarich levarech birkas hagomel. Now, when we talk about hichlim, he's a recovery case, and we know that people who fit into one of four categories, as the Gemara establishes it in Masechta Brachos, with regard to both a Korban Toda and Birchas Hagomel, and it would seem at the surface of it that Corona does not fit into any of these four categories. You know, Arba Tzrichim Lahodos, and we have Yordei Midbarios, and we have Holchei Hayam, Yordei Hayam, we have Misha Chavash, the Beis Hasurim, V'yatza. I mean, none of these categories seem to apply. However, here we have a Rambam Shita, and the Rambam tells us that these four categories are simply indications, and the lowest common denominator of these four categories is sakana, is danger. And therefore, the Rambam, and we'll soon see Shulchan Aruch passages like the Rambam, is that anyone who was exposed to danger, his life was in sakana, is obligated in this bracha of Hagomer. And one of the earlier Achronim, or perhaps the end of the Rishonim, that's the Rivash, lived about 6 centuries ago, he writes, Lav dafka nokta ani arba. The Gemara did not mean to say that it's got to fit into one of these four categories and only. Ela mishum de'elu shchichi. These are more common. Aval hu adin lechol mi shehoya b'sakana v'nitzol. If he was in danger and he was saved, then he will recite this bracha. And the Shulchan Aruch codifies the halacha like this Rivash, which again is a reflection of the Rambam Shita, that anyone who's in sakana, even if he's not in one of these four categories, nevertheless, he will recite Birchas Hagomer. Now, let's just point out that which is obvious, and that is that if this individual who, let's say, tested positive for corona was a real bona fide chole, he was ill, that means he had symptoms, then for sure, without a doubt, he's tied with Birchas Hagomi. However, what's the situation of someone who tested positive, but he was not a chola, he had no symptoms. There's nothing in his body that indicates that something has gone wrong. There's no malfunction of the body. In a case, for example, of a person who has a cold, and you might say that, well, you know, a cold could develop into a flu, which could develop into pneumonia, et cetera, and it could be a life-threatening situation. But right now, he's not a chola. He doesn't go into bed. For example, there's certain shvusim, which are the rabbanos that we override on Shabbos for the sake of a chola, but it's got to be a chola sha'ola mishkamo. In order to be a chola, you have to qualify because you get into bed. This person tested positive for corona, but he never got into bed. And therefore, he doesn't fit into any of the four categories that are listed in the Gemara in Brachos. Now, what about the Rambam says kol chola? This is Perek Yud Milchus Brachos Perek Ches Halacha Ches. Kol chola af chola she'ein bo sakana tzarich levarach. Now the Rambam takes it one step further, and he writes that a chola she'ein bo sakana tzarich levarach. So that according to the Rambam, if someone has symptoms of corona, not just that he tested positive, and he got into bed, he had fatigue, maybe he had fever, he had stomach pains, you know, there are all sorts of different kinds of symptoms of corona. He had those symptoms, he's there for a chola. The Rambam says he's a chola she'ein bo sakana, he has to recite Hagomim. And the Shulchan Aruch paskins like that. So for the Sfaradim, I don't know if we have any representatives of that group of Jews, any Sfaradi following the Shulchan Aruch, the Moran HaMachabim, will recite Hagomel, not just for corona because he had symptoms, but even if he had any illness whatsoever. Based on this psak, which originates in the Rambam and is codified by the Shulchan Aruch. If, on the other hand, he's not a cholim, then l'chora, he didn't have any symptoms, even according to the Shulchan Aruch, and even for the Sfaradim, he should not be reciting Hagomel. So again, let's just clear the pathway for that which is absolutely simple on both ends. On one extreme, he was never a cholim. He tested positive, but he never got into bed. He had no symptoms. Even according to the Shulchan Aruch, he would not bench Gomer. On the other extreme, we have a case of a corona who either he was hospitalized, or if he wasn't hospitalized, the hospitals were watching him very carefully at home. He had serious symptoms, and his situation was possibly life-threatening. Everybody would agree. Even the Torah, who says that only a chola sheyesh bo sakana, and there are more Ashkenazim pastors like the Torah, would say in that case, he's a chola sheyesh bo sakana. V'nisrape, once he recovers, he would have to recite Hagomel. He's one of the four categories mentioned explicitly in the Gemara in Brachos. But now we have the middle ground. This is neither this extreme nor that extreme. He's definitely a chola. He has symptoms, he gets into bed, but no one would say that he's in a sakana. You know, he's got a very bad case of a heavy flu. In such a case, it would be totally in whether he's a Sfaradi or he is an Ashkenaz. A Sfaradi in the case of a chole with bench gomel, even though he's not a sakana. So we're talking about a person who has symptoms, he's in bed as a result of corona, the Sfaradi will have to recite Hagomel. If he's Ashkenazi, then even though he had symptoms, and even though he got into bed, he's a chola shein bo sakana. He's a chola for sure. We would violate shvusim d'Rabbanan. We'd allow him to take medicines on Shabbos, but Hagomel, his life is not in any way in danger. And by all medical assessments, okay, he has a little bit of fever, and for a couple of days he was in bed. He had some stomach aches, a little bit of cramps, maybe he had fatigue, he was very tired, but he was not a chol sheyesh bo sakana. And in fact, by the way, we would certainly say, according to the Ramah, it's not just a chol sheyesh bo sakana, it's a chol sheyesh bo sakana. Therefore, an Ashkenazi would not recite Hagomel in that case. And it seems that the accepted minhag is that anybody whose life was in danger as a result of choli will recite Hagomel. And that's the way it's codified in the Taz, Magen Avraham, Mishnah Berurah. They all, the Aruch HaShulchan, they all agree unanimously. If he was a chola sheyesh bo sakana, v'nisrape, he recites Hagomel. Now, one of the super commentaries on the Rambam, that's the Yad HaMelech. If I'm not mistaken, that's the Noda B'Yehuda's son, Rabbi Yehuda Landau. He writes on this Rambam in the 10th parak of Brachos that even cases like Holchei Midbarios or Yardei Ayam will not recite Hagomel unless Hayo Lahem Sakana Muchashit. Let's try to explain what he means. Kegon Sha'amad Aleim Nachshol O Ruach Si'ara Bayam. So when the Rambam took these four categories, and as the Rivash embellished the Rambam and he expanded it to any case of someone who's in sakana, the Yad HaMelech understands that even in the four cases and the categories that are mentioned explicitly in the Gemara, we're dealing with a situation of mamish sakana. It's not enough that you took a boat across the seas. There was a wave that threatened to capsize the boat. There was a major storm that broke out. Amad aleim nachshol o ruach siyara. Or, for example, Yardei Midbarios, he says, Ta'u b'midbar. He lost his way in the wilderness. I don't have to tell you what a sakana is. So even according to the Rambam, who's willing to take these four cases mentioned in the Gemara as indicative of common cases of sakana, but anything beyond that is also included in sakana if there was a danger, but it means that these four cases have to have a danger. And that would shed a whole other light for the Sfaradim, that even the Sfaradim, just because they took a long trip or because they tested positive and they got into bed, that's not enough. You need a real sakana. But how much more so, according to the Tur, and there are more who passes like the Tur, you need a real sakana. So don't just tell me that, again, if you had no symptoms, that's upright. There's no birchas hagom. But don't just tell me that because you had symptoms and you went into bed for a couple of days, therefore you should bench hagomen. I don't even know if that's true for the Sfaradim based on this Yad Lamel. In Cain, listen to what he writes. Pashut shebnei kilos Sfaradim yivarchu. Okay, he was a recovery case, and he should recite a bracha. and he's a Sfaradi, but again, only because we're not going to accept the interpretation of the Yad HaMelech. Ulanius daiti, gam b'nei kilos Ashkenaz, misha chola, the ofen kal bioser, ukimat v'lo margish tasminim. You always ask the question, if he didn't have any symptoms, why was he tested? I mean, the whole question is about someone who tested positive. I'll tell you why he tested, for the same reason that I tested. Because my wife had symptoms. I didn't have any symptoms. So he's talking about someone who doesn't have any symptoms. Kimat. Maybe he has, I don't know what he means by kimat. He has some sort of a headache or something.
Well, taste. He lost his sense of taste.
Okay, that's could be a serious symptom. I don't know what that's indicative of. You have to ask but I'm talking about a person who kimat had no symptoms whatsoever. He says in such a case, if he got into bed, according to the opinion of all the medical people, no one disagrees, he was not in any danger. Does that mean that everyone's a chola? I have a flu, chas v'shalom, and I go to bed for a couple of days. I have to recite Birchas HaGomel when I get up. Yevarech Birchas HaGomel. And he's talking to Ashkenazim. I'm not even sure if Sfaradim would make HaGomel in such a case if he wasn't in danger. Kuliyavalo Pliyu, all the Rofim say he was not exposed to danger. He got a light case. And probably he should make a different bracha. He should be making a bracha Baruch HaTov HaMeitiv, because he now has antibodies. God relieved him of all the tension and all the anxiety because, although, I don't know, we heard about a case in Deal, New Jersey, of somebody who had corona twice, and there was a lady out in the middle of Wisconsin. Maybe there was someone in Toronto that you heard about who had corona twice, but it's very rare. So a person who gets into bed like he had a flu because he tested positive corona, and then he gets up a day later, in my humble opinion, he should be benching Shechianu V'Kimanu. Comes along the Minchas Oshen, he said, no, he should be benching HaGomel. And even according to the Ashkenazim, why? Sharei machla zu misukenes. Because this is a dangerous disease. The achuz hamesim bo l'tzanarenu gavoy yachasid. I don't get it. Bosai, I don't chap what he's saying over here. I'm not sure if a Sfaradi should be making Birchas HaGomel in such a case. What is it, every chola? No, because the machla itself is potentially dangerous. Yeah, the machla is any machla could be dangerous. And we've heard of people who died of the flu. I don't know if anyone knows the statistics. Maybe you could quickly Google it. How many people before Corona came to the scene died of the flu? Today, you won't be able to make the calculation because anyone who dies of the flu is called a Corona case. But in the old days, before Corona, you could check out, look at 2009 or the beginning of 2010, how many people died of the flu? And you could probably give a whole list of diseases that if they get out of hand and you get a hard case, a very bad case, you can chas v'shalom die. So therefore, everybody who gets the flu and he's not in sakana, he had a light case, he's going to bench Gomel. I don't understand what's going on. Well, you paskin for yourself.
Are you talking introduction? You're going to go to it, or are you just you really And it's how
I
a
didn't
person
catch what you said.
is the Rav just getting us worked up and then he's going to explain how's the Rav looking at this?
I can't justify this. It doesn't make a bit of sense to me to say that because the disease could become dangerous, that puts you in a category of a cholish yesh bo sakana. Is there some sort of basis for such a thing to say, well, let's categorize the machlo? And if we're going to categorize the machlo, I really don't know. Like, for example, how many people in this country tested positive here in Israel? The numbers are humongous. There were periods of time where thousands of people were testing positive within 2 or 3 days. But how many of them died? What percentage of the people who tested positive died? I don't know the exact percentage, but I'm not sure if there aren't other diseases which have a similar success rate in killing you, if you pardon the expression. But does that mean that every time you come down with that disease, it all depends if you're a cholish yesh bo sakana. Is the Minchas Osher going to violate Shabbos for the sake of this cholah? Because even though every single last physician on the face of the earth will guarantee you that in a day he's going to be walking on his feet and feeling groovy, then we're going to be machal Shabbos for him because he's a cholish yesh bo sakana. Why? Because machlazu mesukenes. What do you mean machlazu mesukenes? Where do we see such halacha? The poskim say explicitly that only a person who's bichlal sakana. You know what? I hate to say this out loud, but how many people cross the street, especially around these neighborhoods, and never come back to tell you about it? So every time I cross the street, I should be benching on Gomer. Maybe that's true. Crossing the street is a machla sheyesh bo sakana. But the teretz is, if a car, goes into me, chas v'sholem, or I have a dash, I have a crash, I have this and that, and the car goes upside down, inside out, or maybe I go flying. Recently, my wife experienced the following. A guy stepped out in front of the car. He went into the windshield. Nothing happened to him. I would bench Gobel if I was him. Could you imagine going through the windshield and breaking the windshield of a moving car? That's a pretty dangerous situation. I don't know. Please understand me. I have no axe to grind here. You want to bench Hagomel? Go ahead and bench Hagomel. What do I care? But to call him a cholish yesh,
but isn't it true that if the percent, he's looking at how the percentages are, and in fact, the percentage of people who do die from corona, let's say as compared to the flu, is higher. It's a much higher percentage.
I don't know. I'm not sure that that's true. But again,
it's not true.
I'm just.
No, why do you say it's not true? How do you say
I don't think it's true, Bobby. I don't think it's true. Flu is very, very dangerous. If you don't, I'll give you another example. Bronchitis. I'll give you another example. What about someone who has pneumonia? Does he bench Gomel? I don't know. Maybe according to Rav Asher Weiss, he should bench Gomel because how many people annually die of pneumonia? But again, you're going to have to go through every single machlo and decide for yourself. Again, Google would be very helpful, I suppose. What percentage of people who contract that disease die? And if it's 1 in 1,000, then it's like Corona. I don't know what the numbers are. And he should bench Gomel. But again, that's not my question. My question is, you know how we say in Yiddish, where is the source to say that defining a cholish yesh bo sakana depends not upon your client, but depends upon the machlo? I don't know that that's true. I would like to see some proof of that. I mean, the fact that he says Nirol Anias Daiti gets me very nervous. Whenever I see you want to say a Chiddush in a Rambam, like today we're learning Masechet Yevamos. So there's a famous kasha, Rabbi Kiva. Anybody who learned Yevamos probably spent a month on this kasha, Rabbi Kiva, about why we need a pasuk for Tzoras Sotim, Tzoras Erev. And you want to say a chiddush and write Nirol Daiti and publish it in your local journal. I remember of Goldberg, he had this journal. What was it called? Emek Yoshua. Do you remember that? I have a signed copy from him. May he rest in peace, because I contributed. So you want to write a chiddush and publish it and say Nirol Daiti. It's a pilpul beyond. But he's paskening on a bracha based on a Nirol Daiti, with a radical chiddush that could have tremendous ramifications about every machla. Who cares about the machla? I care about the chola. I could have a serious disease without having contracted it in a serious way. I could have a light disease, relatively, and I could be a chola sheyesh bo sakana. Chas v'shalom, right? Anybody could become a chola sheyesh bo sakana if you pay enough money. No, I'm just joking. But seriously, where do we know that it's a din in the machla, that we have to categorize the machla? If it's a machla sheyesh bo sakana, we're talking about a chola sheyesh bo sakana, not a machla sheyesh bo sakana. So I would just like to know, where this is coming from. Ad Khan. I mean, again, I don't want to, if we spend this amount of time on every one of the 14 shilas, we'll never get anywhere. But I don't know Pshat. Next.
So Roberto, I just Googled this question about COVID versus flu. I'm just coming up with one article, and it's indicating that it's 20 times higher per capita, the COVID versus the flu.
Wow. Okay. What percentage of people die from COVID? Can you get that for me?
Well,
I can tell you this, here in this part of the world, it's a very small percentage.
Right.
I don't know if Google is going to break it down into countries, but maybe.
I have to do some math here.
All right. Okay, anyway. But again, Bobby, you're not listening to me, I don't think. Now, I'm not accusing you, Chas V'Shalom. What I mean to say is, there's a fundamental issue here that doesn't depend upon Google. I would tell you that it doesn't matter what your percentage points are. Just tell me, Yankel Beryl is in bed. Is he a chola sheyesh bo sakana? Is he not? I would ask my local rofim, and if they all agree universally, unanimously, that he's not in a sakana, I would not bench Gomel for such a thing. And Michas Osh is telling me I have to bench Gomel.
Rav, can't we say that this goes with what the Rav has told us before about the concept of fear? The fear is what killed all those people in those other machlas. So the fear with regards to Corona is so strong that even though he's not in a sense of sakana, that's what Rav Ash is saying, that the fear.
I'll tell you, Joe, you know why there's such a tremendous fear? And you know why people are dying from that fear? It's because of this tshuva. Because I'm going to tell you that it's only if you survive that you'll bench Gomel. So of course I'm scared like the dickens, because Rav Ash advice is telling me I'm going to have to bench Gomel. I'm a chola sheyesh bo sakana. All right, let's go on. We're both sides. Again, we can debate this until Mashiach comes, and I think we want to make a little progress. Nimtza b'dir. A person is not able to go out of his room. He is literally locked up in his room like a jail. I'm not sure he's allowed to even open up the door of his room into other rooms in the house. Okay, you'll ask your local health administrator. I don't know. But we're talking about someone who is locked in his room. And it's Leil Shabbos. And they're lighting Shabbos candles. If it's a woman in quarantine, it could be her daughter's lighting Shabbos candles. Her husband is lighting Shabbos. I don't know. It doesn't matter one way or the other. Who is lighting Shabbos candles? Are you going to tell me that the person who's locked up in the room, he has no possibility of seeing the Shabbos candles? He has no theoretical benefit from these Shabbos candles. He's going to make a bracha lahadlik ner shel Shabbos. He's going to fulfill his obligation of ner Shabbos. Look, let him light in his own room. But don't tell me he's going to be yotzi his chiyuv because somebody in the next room is lighting Shabbos candles that he can't see. And I tell you the truth, here I have an axe to grind. I can't understand for the life of me what goes on in hotels, and I just saw it over Pesach, and all the ladies gather together in some room outside of the Chadar Ochel, and they light Shabbos candles, and they make a bracha, and there's no way that they benefit from the Shabbos candles. Okay, maybe you could say, like in Havdalah, they'll look at their nails after they light the Shabbos candles. But that's not Oneg Shabbos. What sets up in their Shabbos is Oneg Shabbos. I mean, the poskim say that if I'm sleeping in one house and I'm eating in another house, Ganze Shaila, where's my Oneg Shabbos? Where do I benefit? Do I get my best benefit by Oneg of Achila and Chesia? That's where I should light. And even though I'm a guest in someone's house, no, I'm going to come home. I'm going to get the benefit when I open my door and I see the light. And I don't walk into the door, and that's where I should be lighting. You know what I'm talking about, right? But imagine in a hotel, they light in the middle of the lobby. I mean, you've seen it. I'm not telling you anything new. Now, I appreciate the problem because to allow every Yankel Beryl to light in his room in a hotel, I mean, that's a security issue. But can't you let people light on the table in the Chadar Ochel where they're going to eat? Is that a security issue? If it is, then don't light. Or maybe light let each lady will have a line. In Britain, they call it a queue. And I think in Canada, they call it a line, like they do in America, no? Anyway, you're standing on the queue, and when it's your turn, you'll turn off the electric lights in the Chadar Ochel of the Beit Malon, of the kibbutz, I don't know where you're eating in the yeshiva, and then you'll turn on the lights and make a bracha on electric lights. You know that Reb Chaim Ozer used to make a bracha lahadlik ner shel Shabbos on electric lights to prove to everyone leman yedu v'yichvu that electricity is also a light. It's also got a din of an air. Okay, I mean, it's complicated, especially now they have these LED lights. I don't know, and that is a different category entirely. I don't know. I'm not sure what malacha you'd be violating with in those cases if it's havara, if it's a. He's in his cheder, they're lighting in the bayis. Poshut. Sheyotze v'adlokas ner Shabbos b'bayis. Is that poshut? Again, who am I? I'm a nobody.
Don't we have such a concept that if your wife is lighting for you, even if you're not in the house?
Well, I think that is a halacha in Ner Shabbos. I'm sorry, in Ner Chanukah. What does that mean? In Ner Chanukah, Haneros halolu kodeshem. The mitzvah is not to benefit from the light. The mitzvah is that the bayis should be equipped with a Ner Chanukah. But in the case of Ner Shabbos, if it's impossible for you to benefit from the Ner Shabbos, where is the kiyum of Oneg Shabbos? Not so posh to me, at least. Now I'm going to say something. I'm going to say something to Yudi. This is really Yudi. No one else should listen. Just Yudi. I wish Rav Silva were here today. I miss him dearly, even though I never met him.
I could look it up.
What?
I could look it up in my notes and see what
Look
he
it up,
said.
Yudi. I'm telling you, because I've heard great things about Rav Silva. If he were here, I don't want to say he's now turning over in his grave. I don't like that phrase. It's not a Jewish phrase. It probably comes from the Goyim. But if he was here today, and you would ask him if a corona positive testing doesn't have any need to get into bed, or even if he does have a need to get into bed, he's going to get out of bed tomorrow, he should bench Gomel. Or if I would ask of Silva, does a person who's locked up in a room fulfill his mitzvah of Ner Shabbos because his lovely wife is lighting in the kitchen? I don't know. I don't think he would go for it.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Again, I'm getting very dramatic, but it irks me. And especially when you use words like pashut. What do you mean pashut? Mi samcha. Well, who said it's pashut? Because you know Shas in and out? Because since you were 0 years old, you did the Mifal HaShas, over and over and over again? Again, I'm not trying to be mizalzel in there. That's an amazing achievement. Now, then he goes on, he says, Bifrat, here I think he's backtracking a little, backpedaling, as we say. Im yesh ktsas or b'mako mishkava, lefi tzracha. So what happens is, either the door is slightly ajar in his room, or maybe the light goes underneath, what do you call the miftan? How do you say the threshold? There's a certain light that penetrates in lefi tzracha, meaning and it serves a goal for him. He's not in pitch darkness. Okay, that I have no problem. But he only adds that as a tag on, and if of course is because I'll tell you what the repercussions again of this Jew is. That this man who's in quarantine is not going to be Makayim the mitzvah of Ner Shabbos. And I have no doubt in my mind he's obligated in the mitzvah of Ner Shabbos. He can't go out of his room, but he has to light in his room. L'gabi tziruf zimun. All right, can you be mitzaref a person who's in quarantine, he can't go out of his room, to 2 other people who are eating in the kitchen and set up a Zoom? Set up a Zimun, I meant to say. We're on Zoom. We're doing Zimun on Zoom. Zimun on Zoom, 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 Zoom. He says, even Sheroim zeh mitztaref hu leZimun. Hadeles, right? Poskim is Hadeles shel Chadra. I'm not sure what the man has in mind. Roim zeh. That's not enough. The whole halach of Zimun is to be koveh Suda together. The man has to eat his Suda in quarantine. So he opens his door, he can see through the door the other 2 gentlemen, and he's part of the Zimun? Where's the tziruf? The entire enterprise of Zimun is predicated on a kviyas Suda together. That's why, by the way, this whole issue about coming in for dessert, you know what I'm talking about. For Sheva Brachas, we have 9 people, 8 people, so we start inviting the neighbors in. That's before Corona, right? You invite neighbors. Now we don't invite neighbors anymore. So I'm not sure exactly because, again, Sheva Brachas depends upon Zimun. And now you're adding him to Zimun because he had a piece of cake. Honestly, I hate to be machmir, but I would say that it's not enough that he eats a piece of cake. We have to eat that cake together with him. And since you could make a bracha achrona mizonos, you can push it a little bit. I would even go a step further. I would feel much more comfortable if he in some way participated in the simcha. Maybe here's the last drasha Maybe he'll say divrei bracha to the chassan v'kala. You take a stranger and you stuff a piece of cake down his throat and you say that he's part of the zibun. Give it a break. Once again, I'm not so sure it's poshut. And for some reason, as soon as I open up this sefer and I see the word poshut, I know it's not poshut. He says that there's a din of shomea ka'onim. Why? Because he's in quarantine, but he hears the mavarech and he has in mind to be yotze. Again, I hate to be a machmir, but I would add one important point here. He's got to recite Amen. It's not a din of Shomea Kohen. Shomea Kohen is not going to help me here. It's a separate din of Aniyas Amen. Shomea Kohen could be mitzaref people together if they could see each other, if they could communicate. He's locked up in quarantine, but he hears the bracha, and therefore he's mitzurov? Because he has kavanah to be Yotzei Kiddush? No. Kiddush requires either one or two things. Either you make your own Kiddush, or you're part of a unit of people who are together being kover, what's called a Suda Shabbos. Ein Kiddush al Makom Suda means a Suda Shabbos. You're not the Makom Suda. But you can make your own Kiddush. What do you mean make my own Kiddush? I don't have wine. I don't know how to recite Kiddush. A person's ignorant. The answer is he says Amen. If he says Amen, then it's Kimotzi Bracha Mipivdam. That's why, by the way, Rav Osai, and I'm sure Rav Silva must have said this a million times, when you go to shul for Ma'ariv, right? Here we're getting to a nice round number. We counted 24. In about an hour, we're going to be rounding it off. And you go to Ma'ariv, and what do? You wait till the shots makes the bracha and counts? Not a good idea, because the very moment that the shots makes the bracha and you say Amen, even if you had in mind that you wouldn't be Yotze, it's irrelevant. That Shomea Ka'ona means I have to have in mind to be Yotze. But if I made the bracha myself by saying Amen, his bracha only facilitated my Amiris HaBracha. How does the word Amen contain a bracha? Just Aleph, Mem, Nun? The answer is, and this halach in Shvuah, if you learn Masechta Shvuos. If you make a Shvuah, you recite a Shvuah, and I say Amen to your Shvuah, it's as if I took the Shvuah. So if this person in quarantine doesn't have the ability to make his own Kiddush, let him listen and say Amen. But don't tell me Shomea Ka'ona. It's not halach in Shomea Ka'ona.
Yeah, he doesn't say Shomea Ka'ona.
Yes, he does. He says, "Upashut sheyachol latzes yidei kiddush im yesh lo kavana shomea umashmiya." Kavana shomea and mashmiya is called shomea ka'ona. If he says Amen, you don't need kavanas mashmiya. You follow? Let's say you make a bracha. You have no idea that I'm listening to your bracha, or if you do, you don't have in mind to be motzin. If I say Amen, I'm yotzin. He's not talking about a case of Amen, he's talking about Shomea Ka'ona. And in Shomea Ka'ona, you need Kavanas HaMashmiya and Kavanas HaShomea.
But
So
why do we always say that the person making Kiddush should have Kavanah to be Mitzi everybody? I don't need that. I can just say Amen.
You don't need it. You don't need it. It's very nice to make that announcement, and it can't hurt. I have no objection, but it's not necessary. If somebody is at the table and he hears the bracha, or even if he's in the next room and he hears the bracha and he recites Amen, that's why when the shots, and by the way, it's not only a problem in Sfiras HaOmen, it's a problem in Shechianu on the night of Yom Kippur. The shots will recite Shechianu out loud. If you take a look in some of the Machzorim, the real scholarly ones, they'll tell you to say it word for word together with the shots.
Yeah.
You've seen it? And then you finish up a little before the shots and you can say Amen to his bracha. That's a different halach. Why are they insisting on reciting Shechianu word for word together with, we used to call it when I was a kid, sing along with Mitch. You remember that? Oh, that was a very popular television program. Why do I say Shechianu along with the shots?
Yeah.
Because if I don't, and I say Amen, and then I recite Shechianu, it's a bracha of Atola. Because Kimotzi bracha mipiv. I don't know why the Sidurim didn't write the same thing with Spiris Omer. It's exactly the same thing. Not only that, in Hallel, the shots gets up and he says Asher Kishon Tzosum Tzivonu, right? Ligmar Sahal if he's a Sephardi, or Al Kriyas Aleph. And then you say Amen, and then you make your own bracha. That's problematic because of Amen is Kimotzi bracha mipiv. I don't even know if Kavanah Shalom Lotzes would help. There's a famous Rabbeinu Yonah that says that if you have kavanah shalom lotzes, then in mitzvah, even if you hold mitzvahs, ain't tzrichas kavanah, you're not yours. Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
There's another eighth also.
say it again, David.
There's another eighth by Sirius Aimer. You say Baruch over Shmoy for the cousin's bracha.
Make a hefsek.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not a bad idea. Baruch Hu Shmo. You sound like a Talmud of the Gaon, the Vilna Gaon. You know, the Vilna Gaon did away with all this Baruch Hu Baruch Shmo business. You know,
But
he
there,
held it was a
the
hefsek.
Rosh Hashanah
I'll tell
says
you,
that
David will make you into a brisker yet.
but the Shiras Aimer is different because it's only because the people are already there. It's not a question of Shemea Kaina. It's the Rosh Hashanah says that it's only because the people happen to be together.
And what does he mean? And since they're together,
In other words, where he defines all the different parameters of brachas,
right?
it turns out that Shiras Aimer is one of the cases that's different because it's only the fact that the people happen to be together.
Wait a second.
It's-
Again, when you say Spirit Summer is different, in what sense is it different? Because I'm not tuned in. It's hard for me to tune into what you're saying. What do you mean Spirit Summer is different?
It's like the case Rav Moshe has. Rav Moshe talks about Sheva brachas together. He says there or people that are sitting together in yeshiva, you know, the bachrim, in terms of a chiyuv of zimun, it's only that they happen to be there in the dining room together. It's not because they sat down together to be kaiveya, a suda together, or to make zimun together. I happen to walk in because I'm a bachur in yeshiva. I'm
Right.
sitting down there, right, at the same time. So the same by Shiras Aimer, it happens to be that we're there because we're davening Marv together. It's not because we came to say Shiras Aimer together, B'davka. Maybe I want to say Shiras Aimer in the Zman when I know it's the proper Zman, not early.
All right.
Right, so
I'm
it's-
not sure I understand what you're saying, Yuni. But okay. Anyway, let me just go on because I need to put my head around this. He says the following. Ha'immutar l'shtamesh be'alkogel b'Shabbos. Now, there are many different types of alkogel. We have here, I'm in the Amic Learning Center now, we have right here alkogel that is 60% alcohol. Not every alkogel is 60% alcohol. What I mean to say is that the alkogel that we have here, I don't know if you're anywhere in the vicinity of if you happen to be anywhere where there's alkogel, take it out and look at the percentages. In this case, this is a liquid. What's the problem? But there are alkogels that are mostly made up of solids. They're sticky, they're pasty. They're not liquidy. If you would turn over alkogel that has a small percentage of alcohol in it, then what you'd find is that it just, what's the word I could use? It sort of dribbles down, you know what I mean by, I'm looking for a better word. It slowly climbs down. It's almost a solid. Like the Gemara has sugyas about dam shenikrash, whether it's roy lizrika or not. Because the law of dam is that nikrash is possible even if afterwards you heat it up and it becomes a liquid again. Once it's possible, it's already possible. And the Gemara is going to talk about how congealed is the dam in order to make it into a solid. I mean, this is no to Kabbalah's Tumah in Ochlin and Mashkin. These are basic halachas. I don't know where to put alcohol. He writes, Mutul ishtamesh v'ein bo chashash mochik. Memachik. Again, he doesn't say pashut. He
What are
goes
we
even a
talking-
step further.
What's the question? I'm sorry. What's the question?
I'll get back to the question in just a second, Joe. I'm right. Just let me finish one sentence. He doesn't say pashut. He says ein bo chashash. That's even worse than pashut. It's not even a chashash. What are you telling me, that there's no chashash to use alcohol on Shabbos? It's mamachik. What's mamachik? Mamachik means when you smooth into your surface something that's sticky or pasty, and you anoint yourself and then push it in. For example, I don't know how many of you brush your teeth on Shabbos. And again, I don't want to get too personal here, about your personal hygiene. But brushing teeth on Shabbos fits into two different issues. One is the brush itself, which might cause bleeding in the gums if you brush aggressively. And the other is the issue of the paste. Now, today in Israel, I don't think this necessarily is popular in Canada. They have these liquid kinds of things. It has a name. It's a generic. It's a company name.
Thiadent.
Thiadent. Excellent. Thiadent. So what you do is you squeeze it into water. Now, that's not a problem at all. But classic for the old timers amongst us that like to use toothpaste, it's a bit of an issue. Why? Because the teeth are a solid substance. And when you take toothpaste, some of the toothpaste gets, what's the word? Gets dissolved in your teeth. Ramosha Soloveitchik, my Rebbe's father, was very makpid about this. He felt that you should not use toothpaste on Shabbos. There are many people who are makil because they claim that the enamel of the tooth is so solid that the paste just simply rolls off the surface of the tooth.
Yeah, it's very different than skin.
Yeah, but skin is really like, changing the substance. You take something that has a pasty quality to it and you push it into your skin. So again, I'm not disagreeing with his conclusion, but to say ein bo chashash, hold on a second. There are different types of alcohol. Not every alcohol, you can't make a sweeping statement that you're allowed to use alcohol on Shabbos. Mishaya bevidud v'hifsid kriyas parshas hachodesh ha'im yesh lo tashlum. This is a ridiculous question, in my opinion. I don't even know why he bothered publishing. There are certain kriyos that are not weekly kriyos. They are pinpointed to a day. The calendar date generates the minhag of that kriya. A classic example would be the Daled Parshios. So if I come today and I read Parshas HaChodesh, with all due respect, well, you know what? I'll make it a little more dramatic. Instead of reading Parshas HaChodesh on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, I'm going to read Parshas HaChodesh on Rosh Chodesh Iyar. That's a ridiculous question. It's a time-bound kriya. And when I say time-bound, it's time-bound to one particular day. There's no tashlumin. Whenever we see the halach of tashlumin, it only operates when you have a broader time period, when you have a possibility of expanding the time period. So if you didn't bring the Karma Chagiga on the first day of Yontif, all of the days of Yontif form an extended unit of that identical Kedush Sayom, allowing you to recite, to bring your Karma Chagiga. Or for example, in Tefillah, we have something called Ona Hasamach. Are you familiar with that phrase? In other words, I missed Shachris, but there's Mincha. So there's Tashlumin because Mincha is attached to Shachris. It's an extension. The big question is if you omitted Mincha, how you were able to have Ma'ariv Shtayim. For that you have to rack your brains. I think we once actually discussed this many years ago. But be that as it may, Tashlumin means when you can extend the time period. If you can't extend the time period, it's a ridiculous question to talk about tashlumin because it's urgent in the time period. A more intelligent question would be, is there tashlumin for Kriyas HaTorah? What do I mean? That the entire week, or at least the first 3 days following Shabbos, you got to grant me, lend themselves to tashlumin. I'll give you an example. In Havdalah, there's an explicit halacha in Shulchan Aruch. I don't have to tell you this, that if you missed Havdalah Motzi Shabbos, you can recite Havdalah as late as Tuesday, not on Wednesday. That's tashlumin. Why? Because Shabbos extends, at least as far as Havdalah is concerned, for another 3 days. So now I have Kriyas HaTorah. Where are they up to in canon? I'm a little confused. Are they up to Achrimos?
Yeah.
Oh, good. So we're on the same page. So this coming Shabbos, B'Shad Tov U'Mutzlachas, we're going to read Achrimos. I was in quarantine. I couldn't hear Achrimos. Come Sunday, come Monday, come Tuesday, I gather together a minyan and I read Achrimos. Dan's finest Shiloh. So the Minchas Osher says, Nira Bora she'eno tashlum. And again, it's upgrade. There's no tashlumin for Parshas HaChodesh. There's no tashlumin for Parshas Zachar. There's no tashlumin for Parshas Shkolim. It's a time, urgent, sensitive minna. But kach gam b'miche hifsid kriyas haTorah, he means on a regular Shabbos. Yashliv parshiosav imat tzibur shnayim mikra v'yechad targum. Now, don't make a mistake about it. He is writing that there is no tashlumin for kriyas haTorah. There's shnayim mikra v'yechad targum. What does he mean? He means that there are 2 halachas. There's one halacha of reading the parsha in front of the tzibur together with another 9 men. And there's another halacha, which is a chovas yachid, that's incumbent upon each individual to be mashlim parshios of im hatzibur, meaning that week is a week of that parsha, and he reads Shnayim Mikra V'Echad Parsha. So today I'm up to Revi in Parshas Achremos, and when I get to Shabbos, hopefully by then I've read all of Parshas Achremos together with the tzibur. So Rav Weiss says that, you know what, if he missed Kriyas HaTorah, then the fallback position, because there's no tashlumin for Kriyas HaTorah, is Shnayim Mikra V'Echad Targum, meaning he has a kiyum of a yachid connecting with the tzibur. I'll give you a beispiel, a mashal l'mad ha'redom. It's one thing to come to daven with a minyan, but it's another thing if you cannot daven with a minyan. The Shulchan Aruch paskins you should try to synchronize your tefillah at home with the minyan. And that's what Rav Weiss is talking about here of Shnayim Mikra V'Echad Targum, that through Shnayim Mikra V'Echad Targum, it's like I sync my Kriya of the Parsha together with the tzibur. But it's not a kiyum of Kriyas HaTorah. For that, I have to be there in the minyan. And there's certainly no Zoom on Shabbos.
The Shiloh camp last year.
And
did
they?
I forget, but a lot of places we were talking about, because you miss so much davening, like shuls are locked up tight. When you come back to shul, you read like the last 30 parshas you missed, or only the last 1 or 2. I think Rav Schechter actually discussed it as well.
Yeah. So there is a din of mashlim Kriyas HaTorah.
Question how much so? Right.
Again, it's a bit of a hassle, but let's say Shachris, maybe you can't do it because of Tircha de Tzibura, but maybe Mincha, you can attach it, maybe it's less than, whatever you want to orchestrate. But to make a flat statement that there's no tashlumin, there's only Shnayim Mikra V'Echad Targum, honestly, I have no clue what he's talking about. And the original shaila about Parshas HaChodesh, I would be embarrassed to even publish it. Let's go on. Number head.
You wouldn't say. Sorry, you wouldn't say that he's talking about with regards to the minyan as a minyan. not as, in other words, he's saying as a tzibur. So
What do you
he's
mean?
saying
I'm in quarantine, Joe, right?
but
So
he's saying,
I'm not part of the tzibur. I'm in
I understand.
quarantine.
right, but he's saying there's a large quantity of, a large amount of people who were in quarantine. A lot of people were not there. So he's
Okay.
asking the question, all those things, it seems like you can even translate it as the tzibur has been in quarantine. Now,
That's not the way
coming
you
back
ask the
to
question, Joe.
No, there's no such thing as a tzibur in quarantine. If the
I
entire
understand.
tzibur is in quarantine, let him read the Torah. Ella, what? Every individual is in quarantine. You add them all together, you get the entire tzibur. You know, it could be that every last Torontonian is in quarantine, but that doesn't mean you have a tzibur in quarantine.
So
A
that's why
tzibur,
he's saying. That's why he's saying there's no such thing.
no, but he's saying that there's no tashlumin for Kriyas HaTorah. There is tashlumin for Kriyas HaTorah. Let's
But
say,
not as a
Joe,
tzibur.
I want to know what happens. I don't know the laws over there, but who's the Prime Minister? Trudeau? What's his name?
I don't want to talk about it.
Okay. Let's say the people in charge of health would say to you in 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now, everyone in Clanton Park could daven together in the shul on Shabbos. Is there tashlumin for the previous parshios that we didn't read? And in my humble opinion, the answer is yes. And David is quoting me, Rav Shechter. So if I'm in the same, categories, if I agree with Rav Shechter, that's great. But don't tell me Shnayim Mikra V'Echad Targum, which is Shnayim Mikra V'Echad Targum. It's like I said, you synchronize your mincha with the tzibur that's davening in the shul. There is some meaning to that, but I wouldn't call that Kriyas HaTorah. You're not reading from a klaf. You're not reading b'tzibur. You make no brachos. And you have to be mafsik with the targum. Again, I wouldn't call targum is not a hefsek. Don't get me wrong. I mean, the Yemenites to this day, not all of them, but some of them will weave in targum into the kriya from one pasuk to the other. This is a big issue during Corona. We call it the minyanei hamirpasot. We call it complicated. One of the issues is, where is the shliach tzibur? That would be my first response to this question. Is the shliach tzibur in a mirpeset? You see, again, if I had my druthers, I would like to see, but again, maybe during quarantine it's impossible. I would like to see 10 people on the ground floor, if you know what I mean, not on mirpasot. Because it's a lot easier, I'll be dim, to join a pre-existing tzibur than to create a tzibur. The laws and the restrictions of creating a tzibur yesh me'ayin are much more demanding than once there is a tzibur and you want to link up to the tzibur. So again, if there were 10 people, all of whom were standing on the same ground, and they have social distancing and they're wearing masks, whatever you want, but they all could see the shliach tzibur. Now I'm on the mirpeset, and I could see the tzibur. That's how I would have started this tshuva. He writes, ha'omdim b'mirpasot mitztarfim l'minyan. No one is on the ground floor. You are creating a minyan out of mirpasot. He adds 2 conditions. First of all, it's got to be roim zed zed. And I suspect that what he means by roim zed zed is that all the people can see in both directions. It's kind of reciprocal. Those who are there on that side can see those who are here on this side. Those who are here on this side can see those on the other side. And it's roim zed zed. I don't know. Now I think he might be going a little bit too far. I would have said, I don't know if I need roim zed zed. Because again, he's not talking about creating a minyan. You're right. If he's creating a minyan, I have 5 here and 5 there, he's right. The basic condition has got to be roim zed zed to be mitzaref the 2 groups of 5. But his question was, Hamispalalim b'mirpasot ha'im mitztarfim leminyan. Can they link up to a pre-existing minyan? In that case, I wouldn't need Roem Zed Zed. If there already is a minyan of Roem Zed Zed, I don't need Roem Zed Zed. Meaning, if you're on your mirpes and you can't see me, I'm on my mirpes and I can see you, or for that matter, I can see anyone who's in the minyan, then I can be mitzaref into the minyan even if you can't see me. He's really upping the antes. His second condition is ein reshus harabim afsekes beinei. Now, Rabosai, I'm going to say the same thing I said about Alkajah. It all depends. What do you mean by reshus harabim afsekes beinei? For this, we have to again stretch our arm out to Hilchas Tumah V'Tara. And Allah is suffik to Rishus HaYachid Sveiko Tameh, Rishus HaRabim Sveiko Tar. What is a Rishus HaRabim? And the Gemara makes a distinction between your Motzach Hama and your Motzach Gesham. And the Gemara postulates that you can have the same exact Rishus and it changes colors like a chameleon. During the winter, there's no one going there, and it's a Rishus HaYachid, it's Sveiko Tameh. And during the summer, there are crowds of people. It's Times Square. And it becomes Rishus HaRabim and Sveiko Tar in that very same Rishus. So what does he mean? Ein Rishus HaRabim overisham. What if there's a Rishus HaRabim? I'll give you an example. You know, you probably could not pull this off on Almore Avenue, let's say, in Canada, right? There are cars and people going by. But let's say you live in a cul-de-sac. Let's say you're on Midville, right? And there are many religious people on Midville. And there's an agreement amongst all the people on Midville that for two people or two houses that are on two sides, what do you call that island in the middle? You know, where they have grass a little bit. I once went over there with my car by accident. Okay, thank God nothing happened. Anyway, there's a little bit of an island in the middle. And it's agreed upon that we daven from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., let's say on a weekday, on Mondays and Thursdays. And no one goes by. Is that a Rishus HaRabim? If we have an agreement, or let's say two people go by during the course of the entire minyan, is that called a Rishus HaRabim? Because anyone can theoretically go by? People have respect. Maybe even the Goyim would have respect. The Jews are at prayer. Again, don't tell me they're praying from 9 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. But the Jews are at prayer, and maybe we shouldn't bother them. So there's sort of like an accepted, how should I say, custom that we don't go by. We don't, we'll find another way of getting to where we have to go. So I'm just saying, like I said about Alkajel before, yesh v'yesh. I wouldn't make a blanket statement about a Rishus HaRabim. I'm not sure if you could create a minyan on two sides of two mirpasot on two sides. That's very questionable. But if you're agreeing that you could create a minyan, don't bust up that minyan under all circumstances with an absolute statement that there's no Rishus HaRabim. It might depend upon how many people would pass through that area on an average hour or as long as it takes for you to daven. I would want to make parallels here to the laws of Rishus HaYachid, Rishus HaRabim. I'm not going to require Shishim Ribu like on Shabbos, but maybe it's 3 people that go by and so forth and so on. Number Vav, we don't have time for, but it's very interesting. There's something called Tainis Bechoros, as you know. And if I'm in Bidud, I cannot participate in the Siyum. Does that mean I have to fast? The same issue will come up during the 9 days, which is not that far around the bend. And we eat meat with the Siyum, but I'm in quarantine, so I'm not part of the Siyum. So it would seem to me, just shooting from the hip, that let's be consistent about it. Am I part of the siyum? Am I not part of the siyum? And he makes the following distinction here. I don't know why. He says that those who cannot join for the siyum, then they should be able to listen to the siyum on the telephone. That makes 100% sense. Why? Because if you listen to the siyum on the telephone, there's no bit of re'iyah, there's no requirement of a tzibur. It's not a davar shebekdusha. It's a davar shel simcha. I am happy about the fact that you finished the Masechta. I didn't finish the Masechta. I tried to learn Shkolim, but I dropped out because of Sukkot in the middle. So I am 7 blot behind in Shkolim. I mean, that's a good excuse that I can't make a siyum because of Pesach. It's always good to blame it on something. The real truth of the matter, Beinenu, don't publicize this, is that Shkolim is tremendously difficult. How Rav Meir Shapiro thought of putting Shkolim into Daf Yomi is beyond my comprehension. Let's just read the words. But anyway, but if you finish Shkolim, I'm thrilled. I don't know if I have to physically be there to share in that simcha, but be consistent about it. If listening to a simcha over the phone, or how much more so over Zoom, which you can really see the whole spiel, and you listen to the Torah and you participate, why shouldn't that work during the 9 days? Obviously, he's holding that the 9 days is some sort of a minhag mi'ikar adin. You know, we have to classify minhagim. And he's not addressing the question, is this a siyum? When you hear the siyum on the phone, are you considered b'simcha? Do you have a halachic status or not? He's considering a different set of variables in the equation. And that is, to what extent is the minhag of fasting, or in the case of Tisha B'Av, of the 9 days not eating meat, to what extent is that a minhag that is kover? So, for example, you have the Mishnah at the beginning of the 4th paragraph of Sachim. You went from one place to another. In this place, they have the minhag makom sheyatza misham, makom sheyigia l'sham. You have to pick up the minhagim and so forth and so on. And maybe the Minchas Asher would claim yesh l'chalek between the minhag of Tainus on Erev Pesach, and there are plenty of Jews who don't have that minhag at all. They don't fast on the Tainus Bechoros. And maybe that puts it into a different category. But when it comes to the minhag of not eating meat during the 9 days, the Mishnah says at the end of Tainus, Mishenichlas Ador Mematim B'Simcha, and Ein Simcha B'Bas. Here, it's a minhag mi'ikar adin that really jumps out of the Mishnah itself. And in that case, we need a real siyum. So, for example, when I go to shul on Erev Pesach, I don't know who this guy is who's making a siyum. I never saw him. I never met him. I daven in Imrei Shefer. There are hundreds of people who daven, thousands of people daven in Imrei Shefer. So one guy gets up and he makes a siyum, and he gives me a piece of of dried apricot, and that's it. I break my fast. Well, I'm not a Bechar, but I do it because I have a son who's a Bechar. That's also a minhag. That's already a minhag on a minhag. So that's good enough. But on the 9 days, and let's say, for example, somebody orchestrated, perfunctorily that the siyum should fall out during the 9 days, I wouldn't be a great fan of that. I mean, Mematim B'Simcha. We're talking about Churban Abayis. Okay, Rabbi, this is where we're going to stop. I thought I was going to get past this entire section, plus another 2 tshuvas. I didn't even make it to the halfway mark. In basketball, maybe it's football, I get confused. You have the what's it called, the halfway mark.
Halftime.
Halftime. I didn't even make it to halftime. Plus Kenneth Ton. I just, certain things just rub me the wrong way. And yes. Okay then, so now the cheer is officially over. If anybody wants to stay another 5 minutes, I can stay another 5 minutes. Joe? Oh, I thought Joe was holding up his hand. He was really just waving goodbye.
Same here.
All right. Colton, thank you so much. Everyone should have a great week.
Go ahead.